All right, I'm here today with David Wenger, an industry investor at the Capital Conference here in Chicago. David, thanks for stopping by.
Of course, thank you.
Now, just to jump right into it, you're more of an expert on the legalization side, the Safe Banking Act in the U.S. Is that correct?
I'm involved with that. Very interested in seeing how that progresses. Yes.
So do you want to talk a little bit about your involvement on that side?
Of course. Yeah, I wrote a white paper called The Green Regulatory Arbitrage, a case for investing in U.S. multi-state vertically integrated cannabis companies.
Yeah.
About a year ago, it was widely read around the world.
Yeah.
Also read in Congress, and I was eventually invited to join the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House Cannabis Working Groups. Yeah. So I'm in D.C. twice a month helping to advance federal cannabis legislation. One of the pending items is the Safe Banking Act, as you mentioned. And the Safe Banking Act, as currently drafted, would be a monumental advance for the industry. It would change the industry completely. It would allow banks to have provide services to cannabis companies and ancillary companies. It would provide for banking services and credit facility services, which would, again, be monumental. But it can be better, and the Safe Banking Act should be clarified, in my view, to extend to capital markets protection as well.
Yeah.
Right now, the term in the Safe Banking Act that's relevant here is the definition of financial services that are protected by the Safe Harbor provision. That definition now is coextensive with the Dodd-Frank Act, which is a consumer protection bill that does not deal with capital markets. So the purpose of Congress's purpose with the Safe Banking Act is to provide a measure of public safety to the industry.
Yeah. And people going into dispensaries with a lot of cash, it's just not...
Getting rid of the cash environment and providing a measure of safety and transparency and legitimacy to the industry. And in the same vein, U.S. cannabis investors are going to continue to invest in U.S. cannabis companies en masse.
Yeah.
And U.S. investors and U.S. taxpayers are entitled to take advantage of our most robust investor disclosure protections that we have that have allowed the United States to become the global leader in capital markets.
Absolutely.
U.S. cannabis companies should be made to be subject to the disclosure requirements that are required of U.S. companies and should be able to then meeting those requirements, list on our exchanges, and take advantage of the same protections afforded to any other company in any other industry in our country. So it would be public safety protection type measure extended to U.S. investors and U.S. cannabis companies in the same vein as we are extending protection to companies and ancillary companies servicing the industry by getting rid of the cash component.
For sure, absolutely. And so obviously you're there. I mean, I agree with you 100%. You're entirely correct. And I'm just curious, as someone who's there, like you said, twice a month in D.C., how do you see the reception from members of the Senate and Congress? Are they, eager to receive your feedback and to make those updates and to even move things through?
So right now, the Safe Banking Act lies with Senator Crapo and his committee on the Senate Banking Committee. And the last word was that Senator Crapo is marking up the bill and working on a version of the bill.
And how long does that take?
No one knows the timing on it, but the proponents of the Safe Banking Act in Congress are optimistic about it stopping. And in conversations with Senator Crapo and members of the Banking Committee, there are no evident showstoppers at this point.
Excellent. Yeah, that's good. And so what would be best case, and then maybe not worst case of doesn't get passed, but worst case long term? What are we looking at best case and worst case in terms of timelines of getting this into moving through the Senate?
I mean, I think that, again, the timing is impossible to predict. This could happen really quickly.
Yeah, but what is that? Is that like a month or is that a year? What is really quickly?
It could happen within a month in terms of the next process will be the Senate, assuming that Senator Crapo and the committee have some edits, it will have to come back and be reconciled with the House version. Yeah. And then once there's a reconciled bill, it'll have to move through again and be eventually signed by the president. Yeah. That could take months or it could take weeks, right? Yeah. It's no one really knows how long it will take. But to your question about our support for this bill, I think Senator Crapo's example, the example of Senator Crapo is illustrative. Senator Crapo, months ago, when the Safe Banking Act was being drafted, was not supportive of it, was not interested in it.
Okay, so it's changed then.
Until a large company from Idaho, where Senator Crapo is from, incidentally, Idaho has no medical cannabis legislation. in Idaho at all, one of the few states. So Senator Crapo does not have a constituency, he thought, that he needed to answer to with respect to this issue, until a very large fertilizer company from Idaho which was selling fertilizer to Washington and Oregon, all of a sudden had their banking transactions interrupted.
Wow,
and they're just selling fertilizer from Idaho.
That's how it works.
And that is a represented constituent for Senator Crapo, and now he realizes, and I think other members of the banking committee will realize, that this is not a cannabis issue. It's not any particular. It's not an issue that is unique to our industry.
No.
It's rather the nature of our capitalist system.
Absolutely.
That in order for any business to do business in the United States, we need to be part of our robust banking system, and we're all industry is intertwined. The banking cannabis companies use construction companies, they use accountants, they use lawyers, they use fertilizer companies, lighting companies. All these businesses need to be dealing with an industry that has all of the financial measures available to them.
And if it opens up, it can add even more to GDP and growth and jobs, et cetera. Like it's great for the economy.
Yeah, it's the nation's fastest growing industry by any measure, including job creation. And from the perspective of the capital markets, right now our U.S. cannabis companies, publicly traded ones, have a combined market cap of about $20 billion, give or take. All of it created on the Canadian Securities Exchange. That $20 billion in combined market cap, we don't know who the winners will be, but will be some, let's say it's $100 or $200 billion in combined market cap. That growth in market capitalization, brand new market capitalization in the United States, will create a lot of economic activity and ETFs and mutual funds and analysts and a lot of jobs. So let's realize that growth and all the related growth here in the United States rather than in Canada. And to put that in perspective a bit more, there are 7 Canadian cannabis companies listed on the NYSE and the NASDAQ that have raised tens of billions of dollars on our capital markets. They don't pay a dime in federal taxes. They don't have any employees here. They're not building any infrastructure here. Our U.S. cannabis companies pay hundreds of millions of dollars in federal taxes, are employing thousands of people around the country, building infrastructure across the country, yet can't raise a dollar on our capital markets. So that's a situation that Congress right now has the unique ability to, and it's before them now, to correct with a slight amendment to the current wording of the Safe Banking Act. And again, there isn't any complaint coming from the industry about the Safe Banking Act. It would be a monumental step forward, but it's great. Let's make it better.
So contact your representatives, right, and get them to push this forward.
I think the message is contact your representatives, and especially our representatives and senators want to hear from ancillary businesses. They understand how this is affecting cannabis businesses. They want to hear from other businesses who are both having trouble servicing the industry and have decided not yet to service the industry because of these issues.
Okay, excellent. Well, I appreciate the insight. Thank you very much, David.
Of course, thank you very much. Thank you.